Professor Ricardo, before in the end, I'll ask Mark to comment on some of the points we've had here. But now we'd like to listen to you, and you are preparing a presentation. I think you have been putting forward arguments that go more in the line of the productive structure of Portugal and how it aims and how it's integrated in the monetary union.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I was not planning to present any graphs today, but at this juncture, I feel tempted to show a couple of them, which are available on the web. I hope they are clear enough here. Okay, I think this will do. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Eduardo Paes Ferreira, who is always very active in these moments of civilization, and also thank Mark Blyth for his work and for this book especially, because, well, it's a good read, first of all, but most of all, it is a very important contribution to the present state of affairs. I had a very special personal pleasure in reading this book because, as Rui Per Jorge mentioned in the introduction, I did my PhD at Bocconi, and the Bocconi School is one of Marx's strawmans, and it's a pleasure to, well, strawman can be understood in a negative way. I prefer to see it in a positive way. In any case, I immediately remembered at a certain point when I was reading the book in 2002, that means 11 years ago, I was just starting my PhD and I was in a macroeconomics lecture course, and one of the Bocconi boys was presenting me a model on business cycles, and when he reached that point in which he says, now we have the assumption of rational expectations, and I raised my hand and asked, excuse me, what about if we introduce in this model a different assumption? Let's suppose we have adaptive expectations. What would be the result of the outcome of this model? And the professor, this macroeconomics professor, told me, if you ever mention adaptive expectations again in this class, I will personally kick you out of the room. And this is not just an anecdote. This is the kind of spirit that existed 10 years ago at Bocconi. It was a strange event then that 2 weeks afterwards, Daniel Kahneman got the Nobel Prize for questioning the kind of hypothesis as a rational expectation. Anyway, this is just a personal note, but it says a lot about the insistence among a huge part of the economics academia to ignore facts and to avoid what I call serious and honest discussions. Now, I didn't want to focus my intervention on this issue. I think the book is really a very good read for everyone who wants to think about the economics profession and also the economic policy in practice and the intellectual influences on this. I would like to focus on a different issue, and I will be brief. As I told you, I want to present two graphs. And I want to present these two graphs because I have the sense that there is something that keeps on being ignored in the discussion about the crisis, about austerity, and about the solutions. We have seen already here Professor César das Neves telling us that the problem is confidence, trust, And we also said, we also heard Mark telling us that no, and he writes that in the book, there is no confidence fairy, that we have to think about finance, and we have to think about moral hazard and banks. Now, in debt. Now, I have very often the sense that there is one variable that is recurrently ignored in the discussions about the present state in Europe, which is deep differences in economic structure. Now, if you look at this graph, what this graph tells us is the relation about the level of interest rates on sovereign bonds and the change in external indebtedness in GDP between 1996 and 2008. Mark and other people insist that we don't have a public debt problem, but we do have an external debt problem. That is, those countries that faced big tensions in sovereign debt bonds since the crisis began in Europe, in the Eurozone, are countries which have shown clear problems with external debt for a long time. So there is something robust here. Not incidentally, well, it was incidentally, but Ireland is not in this graph, and there is no trick in here. Data for Ireland was not available from AMECO during this period. But actually, we will see in a moment that Ireland is an exception for what I tell next. Because what I want to understand is, why do these countries have problems with external debt? And the usual explanation is profligacy. These countries have spent too much, they have depended on external money, they didn't want to work, they just wanted to consume, so obviously they have to have problems. Now, the second graph is this one. This graph relates the change in external indebtedness. Now we have it on the vertical axis, and relates this to the economic structure of these countries. This exercise can be made using very different proxies on the structure of these economies. Here I use high-tech and medium-tech manufacturing together with knowledge-intensive services. You can use, there are many different variables of product sophistication, whatever, it all boils down to the same result. Basically what we see here is the following. Countries that have, from the start, we are talking about 98, because I didn't have data for 96, but it would have been the same. Countries which have a very low sophisticated economic structure were the ones who have had problems with increases in external debt. This is what you see in Europe, okay? So the highest, the more qualified is your economic structure, less problems you have with external debt. So the main message I think we should at least stop a second to think about is that maybe what's happening in Europe is that economies are not prepared to work under the same rules. Economies in Europe, and especially in the Eurozone, because of their structure, because this word has already been used here, because of the elasticity of their exports with regard to prices. But I would say more generally, countries in Europe are not equally prepared to deal with globalization, and probably the rules that apply to some of them cannot apply to all of them. And this is very important, not only to understand how we got to the crisis. This is also very important to understand how can we get out of the crisis. Let's assume something for a second. Let's assume that we would put all the public debt on zero. Public and private debt on zero. We will start over again. My forecast is that in 15 years, if there are no changes in rules, we will be exactly at the same point where we are now, even if, and here is a point where I don't feel totally comfortable with Marx's book, because Marx, at the end of this book, I have the sense that he changed a bit his view on this, because basically he said typically we fight this type of crisis through deflation, inflation, devaluation, or default. And he says none of this is good. We have to think about the fifth possibility, which is financial repression and also making the rich pay the taxes. Okay, but my forecast would be, even if we do the fifth one, if we don't find a solution for having countries with extremely different structures working under the same rules, we will get the problems all over again. And I think this is the time to think about these issues, because we are basically talking about how to integrate very heterogeneous regions in a unified market as the European Union. Thank you.